The email arrived at 2:17 a.m., bright and cold in the dark room. Daniel was still awake, sitting at his small kitchen table with his laptop open, half reading numbers from a report he didn't really need to check. He had built the habit of late nights over the years. Ardent Analytics had started as a dream in his garage, and it had grown because he refused to sleep when there was work to do. When the notification popped up, he almost ignored it. The sender's name made him pause. It was from the board. He clicked. The message was short, formal, and sharp. Effective immediately. He was removed as CEO. The board had voted. Leadership would transfer to Marcus Hale. Daniel blinked. He read it again. Removed. The word felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else's life. His name was at the top of the email. There was no mistake. He opened the attachment. Legal documents filled the screen. Signatures, dates, clauses. His own signature appeared on a contract from 6 years ago. A clause about majority confidence. A clause he had skimmed because he had trusted the people sitting beside him. He leaned back in his chair. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the city lights flickered. For a long moment, he felt nothing. No anger, no panic. Just emptiness. Marcus Hale, his best friend. They had met in university, ambitious students who stayed after lectures to argue about ideas. Marcus had been precise and calm. Daniel had been bold and restless. Together, they balanced each other. When Daniel suggested building a data analytics firm from scratch, Marcus was the first to say yes. They had shaken hands in a coffee shop and promised to build something that would last. Ardent was their child. Daniel had led the vision. Marcus had built the structure. Daniel handled investors with fire and passion. Marcus handled contracts with steady logic. They trusted each other without question. Daniel's phone buzzed. News alerts were already appearing. Ardent announces leadership transition. Marcus Hale steps in as CEO. The articles were polite. They praised Daniel's early contributions and called Marcus the steady hand needed for the company's next phase. Steady hand. Daniel's jaw tightened. He thought of the last board meeting. Marcus had been quiet, listening, taking notes. Daniel had presented a bold expansion plan. Board members had looked unsure. Marcus had said nothing against him. Not in that room. Daniel stood and walked to the window. The city stretched below him, calm and unaware. He pressed his hand against the cool glass. He tried to remember the first day they moved into their tiny office. The paint had peeled from the walls. The chairs didn't match. They had laughed at the emptiness and promised that one day the room would be too small for their success. Marcus had clapped him on the back and said, "We rise together." Together. Daniel felt the first spark of heat in his chest. He returned to the table and opened his messages. There was one from Marcus, sent 10 minutes after the board's email. "We need to talk." That was all. No explanation. No apology. Daniel stared at the words. His mind raced through the last few months. Had there been signs? Marcus had been meeting privately with certain investors more often. He had insisted on reviewing contracts alone. Daniel had assumed it was simple caution. He had trusted him. His phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. Daniel let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then he answered. "Daniel," Marcus said. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "I know you're upset." Upset. The word felt small. "What did you do?" Daniel asked quietly. Marcus exhaled. The board was losing confidence. "Your expansion plan was too aggressive. We could have collapsed. Daniel repeated. "I did what I had to do to protect the company." Protect. Daniel felt the heat grow stronger. "You could have talked to me. I tried," Marcus replied. "You weren't listening. You've been pushing too hard. The investors were scared, so you convinced them to remove me." "I convinced them we needed stability." Stability. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. You built this with me. I'm trying to save it, Marcus said. You're brilliant, but you take risks that could destroy everything. The line went quiet for a second. Daniel realized something unsettling. Marcus believed what he was saying. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't angry. He sounded certain. You think I'm the threat? Daniel said slowly. I think you're too. Close to it, Marcus replied. You don't see the danger. Daniel's mind flashed to nights spent sleeping on the office couch. It's the loan he had taken when no investor would answer his calls. To the first big client he had convinced. With nothing but belief. He had given Arden everything, and you see it clearly. Daniel asked. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. That was the moment the emptiness cracked. Not because Marcus had betrayed him, but because Marcus believed he was right, Daniel. Ended the call without another word. He stood in the center of his apartment, breathing slowly. The world felt tilted. His life had been defined by Ardent. Every decision, every plan, every goal had pointed toward its growth. Now he was outside it, like a stranger looking in through glass. He opened social media. Messages poured in. Some were shocked. Some were polite. A few asked what had happened. None accused Marcus of betrayal. The narrative was already set. Visionary founder steps aside. Responsible partner takes charge. Daniel felt something harden inside him. He opened the company's internal portal. Its access was revoked. That small message hurt more than the board's email. Access denied. The system he had helped design now rejected him. He paced the room. Anger began to replace shock. He thought about the clause in the contract. He remembered signing it. Marcus had drafted the language. Daniel had joked about how formal it sounded. Marcus had smiled and said, it's just protection for everyone. Protection. Daniel laughed once, sharp and humorless. By sunrise, he had not slept. The sky shifted from black to gray. The city woke up, cars moved, people went to work. Inside his apartment, Daniel felt like time had frozen. He sat again at the table and opened the legal document. He read every line carefully. The clause allowed the board to remove a CEO if they lost majority confidence. Marcus had gathered that majority. How long had he been planning it? Daniel's mind replayed the last quarterly review. Marcus had questioned the timeline of the expansion. He had suggested delaying. Daniel had pushed forward. They had argued, but it had felt normal. Partners disagreed. That was healthy. Had that been the beginning? A memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had said, sometimes you don't see the cliff until you're already falling. Daniel had dismissed it as caution. Now the words echoed differently. Daniel stood and walked to a small shelf near his desk. On it sat a framed photo of him and Marcus from their early days. They were standing in front of a whiteboard filled with messy ideas. Both were smiling, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright with hope. Daniel picked up the frame. He searched Marcus's face in the picture. He saw ambition, pride, maybe even a hint of something else in V. Had it always been there? He set the frame down carefully. His chest felt tight, but his thoughts grew clearer. Betrayal was not loud. It was quiet and patient. It waited for the right moment. Marcus had waited. Daniel imagined the private conversations. The careful words. To investors, the framing of Daniel as unstable, too bold, too risky, not ready for the next stage. It was clever and it worked. The anger inside him shifted shape. It became focused. Marcus believed he was protecting Ardent. The board believed they were securing stability. They had written Daniel out of the story, as if he were a chapter that had already served its purpose. Daniel walked back to the window. The sun was rising fully now, casting gold across the buildings. He watched the light spread and felt something cold settle in his chest. He would not beg to return. He would not send emotional messages or plead for reconsideration. But he would not forget Marcus had made a choice. He had decided that removing Daniel was justified, that the end saving the company excused the method. Daniel whispered to himself, "You should have trusted me." But trust, once broken, did not repair easily. His phone buzzed again. A message from an employee he had mentored. "Is it true? You really gone?" "Gone." Daniel typed back a simple reply. "Yes. Take care of yourself." He stared at the sent message and felt the final piece fall into place. Ardent would move. Forward without him. Marcus would sit in the office they had designed together. He would lead meetings. He would sign deals. Daniel would watch from the outside. The thought burned. For years. Daniel had defined himself by growth, by vision, by the rush of building something from nothing. Now that identity had been taken, not by market failure, not by chance, but by someone who once called him brother. The sense of injustice tightened like a fist around his heart. He turned away from the window and faced the room. This was not just about a job that was about being replaced in his own story. As the morning light filled the apartment, Daniel felt the first clear shape of a new emotion rise above the shock and the hurt. It was not loud. It was steady. If Marcus believed he had saved the company by removing him, then Marcus would one day understand what it meant to be cut out without. Warning. Daniel did not yet know how, he did not yet know when, but as he closed his laptop and stood alone in the quiet aftermath of betrayal, one truth settled deep inside him. He would not let this be the end of his story, and he would not forget what had been taken. Daniel's days became quiet after the betrayal, but his mind never rested. He woke early each morning out of habit, reaching for a phone that no longer carried urgent company messages. The silence felt unnatural. For years, every hour had mattered. Now time stretched endlessly, and in that empty space, one thought returned again, and again. Marcus had taken everything from him. The anger no longer came in sudden waves. It settled deep, calm, and sharp, guiding his focus. Instead of avoiding the pain, Daniel leaned into it. He opened his laptop and began studying Ardent from the outside. Public filings, investor briefings, interviews, he read everything carefully. Marcus appeared confident in every article, speaking about stability and responsible growth. The company's value continued to rise, and the media praised the leadership change as a smart decision. Each headline felt like a quiet insult. Daniel realized something important. Marcus had not destroyed the company. He had rewritten its story, placing himself at the center and pushing Daniel into the past. Daniel started building a private file. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became purpose. He examined financial patterns and expansion deals announced after his removal. Marcus had shifted strategies quickly, entering new markets faster than expected. Daniel noticed risks hidden. Beneath polished presentations, deadlines were tight. Chins were optimistic. Marcus was trying to prove he deserved the position, and in doing so, he was taking chances he once warned Daniel against. The irony did not escape him. Late at night, Daniel sat surrounded by notes and reports connecting details piece by piece. If exposed publicly, the weaknesses could shake investor confidence. It would not require lies or manipulation, only truths placed in the right hands. One detailed report sent anonymously could trigger investigations. Marcus's reputation would collapse under pressure. The idea brought a strange sense of relief. For the first time since the betrayal, Daniel felt powerful again. Revenge appeared logical, almost fair. Marcus had used the system to remove him. Daniel could use the same system to reveal Marcus's mistakes. Yet something unsettled him during a walk through the city one afternoon. Daniel passed a cafe where he and Marcus used to meet during their early startup days. He stopped without meaning to. Through the window, he saw young professionals laughing over laptops, full of ambition and hope. The memory hit him hard. He remembered Marcus celebrating their first client, shouting with joy, promising they would change the industry together. Daniel forced himself to keep walking, but doubt followed him. Was Marcus always planning betrayal, or had fear pushed him into it? Marcus had often worried about failure. Investors trusted Daniel's vision, but Marcus carried the pressure of keeping everything stable. Maybe Marcus truly believed he was saving the company. That thought complicated Daniel's anger. Revenge felt simple when the enemy was cruel. It became harder when the enemy believed he was right. A week later, Daniel met Elaine, a former board member who had quietly disagreed with his removal. Over coffee, she spoke carefully. "Marcus didn't celebrate your exit," she said. "He looked terrified, kept saying the company needed protection." Daniel frowned. "Protection from me? He thought you were moving too fast," she replied. "He believed one mistake could destroy everything you built." The words stayed with Daniel long after the meeting ended. Marcus had not acted out of greed alone. He had acted out of fear. That realization didn't erase the betrayal, but it changed its shape. Back home, Daniel opened his file again. The evidence was strong. Numbers didn't lie. Marcus's decisions carried risk, and the board might never notice until it was too late. Daniel imagined sending the information to a journalist. The story would spread quickly. Investors would panic. The board would question Marcus just as they had questioned Daniel. He pictured Marcus reading the news, feeling shock, confusion, helplessness. The image satisfied him and disturbed him at the same time. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He noticed how every thought now revolved around Marcus. Every plan, every emotion, every late night. Revenge was giving him direction, but it was also keeping him trapped in the past. Marcus still controlled his attention without even trying. Days passed as Daniel argued silently with himself. One part of him demanded justice. Another asked what victory would truly look like. If Ardent fell, employees would lose stability. People who trusted both founders would suffer consequences they never chose. One evening, he opened an email draft addressed to a well-known financial reporter. He began typing slowly, explaining concerns about Ardent's strategy. The words flowed easily. Facts lined up perfectly. The message sounded professional, objective, undeniable. He stopped before attaching the files. His reflection stared back. From the dark laptop screen, he looked tired, older than he remembered. Revenge had given him energy, but not peace. Daniel realized he had reached a crossroads. Sending the email would change everything. It would bring satisfaction, maybe even public validation. The world would finally see that Marcus was not the flawless leader they believed, but it would also mean destroying something Daniel once loved. His finger hovered over the send button as his thoughts raced. He remembered sleepless nights building Ardent from nothing. He remembered employees celebrating promotions, interns thanking him for opportunities, teams believing in the mission. Revenge would not only punish Marcus, it would erase parts of Daniel's own legacy. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The anger still burned, but now it competed with something else, understanding. Marcus had betrayed him, yes. But Daniel now faced a choice that would define who he became next. The laptop remained open, the email unfinished, the decision waiting, and for the first time since the betrayal. Daniel understood that revenge was not just about hurting someone else. It was about deciding what kind of person he wanted to be when the moment finally came. The opportunity for revenge arrived on a quiet Monday morning. Daniel saw the headline while drinking coffee at his kitchen table. Ardent Analytics had announced its biggest acquisition yet, a bold move that surprised the market. Investors praised Marcus for decisive leadership, calling the deal a sign of confidence and strength. Daniel read every detail carefully, and within minutes he understood something others did not. The numbers were fragile. The projections depended on perfect timing and flawless execution. One serious question from regulators or journalists could shake the entire agreement. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment he had been waiting for without admitting it to himself. Everything he had studied over the past weeks, suddenly, aligned. The risks he had documented, the aggressive expansion Marcus had pushed, the pressure to prove himself, it all pointed toward vulnerability. Daniel knew exactly how to expose it. He opened his laptop and pulled up the file he had built piece by piece. Charts, notes, financial comparisons, and timelines filled the screen. The evidence was clear and factual. No exaggeration was needed. If released publicly, the information would force scrutiny. Investors would panic. The board would question Marcus's leadership. The same system used to remove Daniel would turn against Marcus. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself to imagine it fully. News alerts flashing across phones. Commentators questioning Marcus's judgment. The calm confidence Marcus showed in interviews fading under pressure. Daniel pictured Marcus sitting alone late at night, reading criticism, realizing what it felt like to lose control. The thought brought a sharp sense of satisfaction. He began writing an email to a respected financial journalist. His words were precise and professional. He explained concerns about the acquisition, highlighting inconsistencies without sounding emotional. Years of leadership made it easy for him to sound objective. Anyone reading the message would believe. It came from a concerned insider trying to protect investors. Daniel paused only once, then continued typing. The email was nearly perfect. All that remained was attaching the documents. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the window. The steady sound filled the room, slowing his thoughts. Daniel leaned back and rubbed his eyes. He felt tired not physically, but emotionally. Weeks of anger, planning, and imagining revenge had drained him more than he expected. He looked around his apartment. It was simple, quiet, free from the constant pressure he once lived under. For the first time in years, no meetings waited for him, no urgent calls demanded his attention. He realized something strange. Despite everything, he had started to breathe easier. His gaze returned to the screen. If he sent the email, the story would explode. Marcus would fall. The world would know Daniel had been right all along. Justice would be served. But another thought followed quickly. What happened after that? Ardent might collapse under investigation. Employees who trusted the company would face uncertainty. Young workers who had nothing to do with the betrayal would suffer consequences. The company Daniel built would become a cautionary tale instead of a success. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered their early days again, the excitement, the shared belief that they were building something meaningful. Marcus had not started as an enemy. Somewhere along the way, fear and ambition had twisted trust into rivalry. Daniel whispered quietly, "What does winning even look like?" The question lingered. He imagined sending the email and feeling relief for a moment, only to wake the next day still carrying bitterness. Revenge would not restore the past. It would not return trust. It would only create another loss. The realization came slowly but firmly. Revenge was not about justice anymore. It was about proving pain mattered. And Daniel no longer needed proof of that. He moved the cursor toward the attachment icon. Then he stopped instead. He highlighted the entire email draft and deleted it. The blank screen felt heavier than any action he could have taken. For a few seconds, doubt rushed in. Had he just given up his chance? Had he allowed Marcus to escape consequences? But as the silence settled, Daniel noticed something unexpected. The tight pressure in his chest eased. The anger that had followed him for weeks loosened its grip. He closed the laptop. Later that afternoon, Daniel went for a long walk through the city. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining under soft sunlight. People moved around him, busy with their own lives, unaware of the decision he had just made. The world continued normally, and for the first time since the betrayal, Daniel felt separate from it in a peaceful way rather than a painful one. Days passed. News about Ardent. Shifted analysts began questioning the acquisition on their own. Market pressures created challenges Marcus had to face publicly. Daniel watched from a distance, realizing that consequences often arrived without revenge needing to push them. One evening, his phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Daniel hesitated before answering. Marcus sounded tired, less confident than before. The conversation was short and careful. He spoke about stress, about responsibility, about how leadership felt heavier than expected. He never directly apologized, but regret lingered between his words. Daniel listened quietly. He did not accuse or argue. When the call ended, he felt no victory and no anger, only closure. He understood something clearly now. Revenge would have tied him forever to the moment of betrayal. Walking away allowed him to move forward instead. In the following weeks, Daniel began working on a new project, smaller, but built with lessons learned. He read contracts carefully, chose partners slowly, and trusted without blindness. The betrayal remained part of his story, but it no longer controlled it. Sometimes he wondered, what would have happened if he had sent the email? Maybe Marcus would have fallen faster. Maybe Daniel would have felt justified, but deep down, he knew the truth. Revenge might have satisfied his anger for a moment. But restraint had restored his peace. Standing in his new office months later, sunlight filling the room, Daniel realized the greatest victory was not watching someone else fail. It was refusing to become someone ruled by bitterness. The betrayal had changed him. But it had also taught him something lasting. Justice and revenge are not the same. One seeks balance. The other feeds pain. And in choosing not to strike back, Daniel finally took back control of his own life.